I call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, October 9th, 2023, and the time is 6 p.m. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Welcome members of the community here tonight to observe the important work being done on behalf of all school district stakeholders. Dr. Hillman is not here tonight, but he is joining us virtually. Welcome and good evening, Dr. Hillman.
Good evening, everyone.
Items in the table file.
Yes, we have several items in the table file this evening. We have some personnel personnel items, including appointments, increase, decrease, changes in assignments. There's one leave of absence, a few resignations, a grant application, and some information about the Northfield area retired educators luncheon. That's the table file for this evening.
Dr. Hillman, if there are no objections, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Seeing none, we'll move ahead. We are joined tonight by student Maddie Busman, who will read the district's land acknowledgement statement. Welcome, Maddie.
Hi, the Northfield School District recognizes that we reside on the homeland of the Wapakute tribe of the Dakota Nation. We acknowledge the wrongdoings, both previous and ongoing, and we strive to repair and strengthen our relations with Indigenous peoples. Thank you.
Maddie. All right. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Jeff, do you have a second? Jenny? Okay. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to the public comment portion of our meeting. We do have one person here tonight to speak, so I will read our very long guidelines. So give me a minute or two here to read through this. This is an opportunity for residents, business and property owners, parents, guardians, students, and employees of the Northfield School District to address the board. All comments to the board must adhere to the guidelines set in place by District Policy 206 regarding public comment. This is not a time to debate an issue, but only for the board to hear your comments. You are prohibited from making comments about specific students, staff, and administrators. The board respects and values input, but when it relates to a specific individual or to a specific matter, this input must be heard by the appropriate personnel, including the building principal or superintendent, and not during an open meeting of the school board. It will be gavelled out of order if your comments are not in compliance with these guidelines. Please address the board from the podium. After being recognized by the board chair, identify yourself and if you will represent a group. We require that you limit your remarks for 3 minutes. You are not allowed to yield your time to another person. It is expected that members of the public will address the remarks with civility and respect. Personal attacks by anyone addressing the board are unacceptable. Please keep your mask on when speaking from the podium. That's outdated. I apologize. The board has allotted up to a total of 30 minutes for public comment at the regular school board meeting. I will now begin to call those who have signed up to speak in the order in which they signed in. Administrative Assistant Anita Ozzie will signal each speaker with the time they have remaining at 1 minute, 30 seconds, and 10-second intervals. Again, please make your comments as brief as possible, but no more than 3 minutes. I will now call Arlene Gallardo to the podium. Welcome, Arlene.
Thank you. Sad to say I've been here for 7 years and the first time I've been here at a school meeting. So good evening, school board members. My name is Arlene Gallardo and I do work in the district office as an HR generalist. I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. The reason that I'm here is because of the recent news that was shared a week ago in our district office meeting about a proposal being made to the school board to reclassify the benefits and payroll specialist positions in the district office. We were told that this decision came after the resignation of the person that was in that position before. And seeing that her new position, as she resigned from that position to leave to a different school, was now receiving a much more higher pay rate for this same position that they were doing here in the Northfield schools. It was told to us that this is the first time that they noticed that this market was changed and that they would need. It was said that the district felt they would need to raise the pay rate to be in market range to the other surrounding districts and for us to get a higher qualified applicant. Sorry, I'm nervous. I would first like to say that I am in total agreement with this decision, but I would like to request that the district add to their proposal that they would reclassify additional positions to match the market adjustments for the administrative assistant positions in the district office only at this time. I began employment in 2016 with the Northfield Public Schools, and I have been on the negotiations committee a couple of times. The last one I was on was when the pandemic hit. It was then discussed within our group that our pay was not equal to the same positions elsewhere in the surrounding communities. I was part of the request made from the office employee group at the time to the district to please reevaluate the classifications of our jobs and consider increasing the pay to match the work we do for the district. Our group spent many hours researching and comparing jobs and pay rates for surrounding businesses. So we have a minute left. So to the point, I guess, we have multiple times I've asked the district to take in consideration to reclassify our positions, and each time we were told that that was not feasible and they were unwilling to look at that at those times, and understanding that we were during a pandemic and all that. But again, in this last research or these last things, they had asked us to do the same research, and they have not done anything with that. But why I'm here is I'm asking at this time to please take all the information we have sent before to reconsider reclassifying all of our positions in the district office assistants, along with the two that they are proposing today.
Thank you, Arlene. That was the only public comment we have tonight, so this will conclude this portion of our meeting. The board appreciates the time you took to share your perspective tonight. Okay, now we'll go back to Dr. Hillman for announcements and recognitions.
And Corey, we have no announcements nor recognitions this evening.
All right, thank you. We'll move right ahead to items for discussions and reports. We'll start with the instructional services report. We are joined by Director of Instruction Services, Hope Langston, who will provide an update on the summer work teams and other areas of focus for the department of the 2023-24 school year. Welcome, Hope.
Good evening. See how the colors look with this. Tonight's a short version, right? I get 15 minutes. Here we go. I'll be back in November with the world's best workforce for the last time in its current form, and it's going to change as of the legislation. So I'm happy to be here tonight to speak on behalf of our team. We are excited to share some of the work we're doing. I know you guys see this. We start every meeting with this when we work with groups across the district, because these metrics and our strategic commitments ground everything we do. So we want to remind people, put it in front of them. Again, our department's purpose is really critical for this preparation of every student. We're also working to elevate our practices this year and in all of these areas. So again, we show this at the start of every meeting. And then the mission of our department. So we are striving for excellence in teaching and learning. We want to maximize our student outcomes. We know we work within a system of continuous improvement, and that grounds the work that we do each and every day. Our team revisited this graphic at the end of the last year. The responsibilities of our department are far-reaching, and we are committed to doing the best that we can in each of these areas. So we support district operations in all of those areas that you see listed. I won't read them for you. And then a lot of coaching, both at the building level, the teacher level, and then through the MTSS process that Carrie Duba is leading. We are working with a lot of district committees and then the PD across the district, both at the building level, in the PLCs, and then in conjunction with the district IT team. So where have we been this year? Huge shout out to the district work teams. I continue to be amazed by the work that our teacher teams do in the summer. And it's truly one of the highlights of the work that I consider the highlights of in my job, working with these teacher leaders. So you can see the list here of the district work teams that met this year. What was neat is to see the evolution of the teams that had done a lot of groundwork, the PLC team, family engagement, the workshop week, and the core performance expectations teams. They actually just then came together for sort of a tweaking session, you know, what needed to be changed this year, but the bulk of the work had been done. And so those were very short-term teams for this year, which is kind of nice. I think that's something we always want to do, is lay the groundwork and then revisit what we're doing so that we can improve. And that was the case for each of those teams. The e-learning team for elementary revisited the plans that are in place. Should we have a number of snow days this year, we are ready to roll. And then you can see the remainder of the teams. Compañeros was a team that was brought together again to look at the curriculum that's being used in that grades 1 through 5 program. And we continue to meet during the school year. We have another meeting next week, actually. So these are all things that will continue. But again, a shout out to all 70+ staff members who served on these teams and really become leaders within their buildings, helping us to continue the forward momentum. So we have a number of priorities for this year. The content and instructional review cycle, which is really that system of looking at each content area, is really in full swing. And we learned some things over the past year and 2 years, really. And we tweaked the cycle a little bit to make sure that we are meeting every team's needs. Different teams have had different experiences with this process. And so we are honoring the work that has been done, and then also understanding there's some teams that need some more hours because they haven't engaged in this work formally. So that's a big part of our school year. And then the PLC process, our focus this year is on high impact instructional strategies that we know make the most difference for kids. And so we've embedded some training and aligned building staff development to those strategies as well. And teams submit their SMART goals on Wednesday. So we're excited to see the goals that are coming in to move students. The district MTSS process, as you heard about last year, that's a part of a grant from MDE. Carrie Duba is leading that cause. And we are in year 2 of that. And the building teams are really doing well. A shout out to the building leaders who serve on their MTSS team, that both teachers, behavior coaches, principals, school psychologists, social workers, a wide cross-section of our staff in each building. And they are the ones driving that focus on tier 1 instruction, and then how we will manage kids who might need a little something more in tier 2 and tier 3. And then the final circle happens to be the READ Act. And that is something that we are spending a lot of time on right now because of all the legislation that was passed, this one has some key metrics that are due this year. And so there's a link to the timeline for some of those things, but I'm just gonna talk a little bit about what's due in this current school year. So we are under the legislation, we are obligated to notify parents after the mandatory 2-time-a-year screening. So we already had screened all of our kids, so that's great. But now we need to send out notification if a student is not reading at grade level. And within that letter, we need to give some more details about the screener results, what we are doing to provide differentiated reading instruction, and then some recommendations about how the family can support the reading process with specific activities that they can do at home. Those components of the letter are mandated in the legislation. So we are right now, this week, preparing the mail merge to send out to our families who fall under the criteria outlined in the legislation. Just so you have full knowledge, we will not be notifying kindergarten parents until later in the year because we feel like one screener as they are just entering school is just not sufficient. For our other students in grades 1 through 5, we are saying 2 consecutive screener scores at less than the 40th percentile. So that is our first threshold. There is no guidance in the legislation except for students who are not reading at grade level. But that is where we are going to start in Northfield, and we believe that this is going to have an impact on both families and our staff in full awareness of what's happening with the students' reading instruction. Related to that are some requirements around training. And as you all know, because we've talked about it a lot, we have many staff members who are trained in letters. So I just took a call from Lakeville today who is trying to figure out how they're going to, fit in all this training requirement. We are ahead of the game on that. And so we can take a little bit more time with some of the aspects of training that are also outlined in the bill, but due in the coming years. So we have a good core of our staff that's trained. And as a result of that, there are some curricular changes that have been made this year that we believe will move kids. And we're already starting to see that. People will text me pictures of kids' work and things that they're excited about. So we feel like we've made good progress implementing the READ Act. Beyond the READ Act, there's some pretty significant changes that have to do with high school coursework, personal finance, ethnic studies, and civics course placement. And we are beginning to meet with the high school teams. So there's a lot to unpack, as you know, in this legislation. We just take it piece by piece and start that work. Questions? Interesting. The S ended up below the N.
So we only get one question.
Yeah, apparently.
Thank you.
Didn't
both.
look that way on my screen.
Any questions or comments from the board? Jenny.
Thank you, Hope, for all the information, not only tonight, but all the other additional information emailed. I went through a lot of it, and I just have a few questions on the instructional services update that we were sent.
Mm-hmm.
So over 70 members of our staff joined our district work teams. So that was the summer work teams you're talking
Yes.
about.
Yes.
And then how many applicants were there originally?
We actually placed everybody this year. So there were fewer applicants this year than we had last year, but that made it a little bit easier because everyone could get a slot who wanted one.
Okay, that's awesome. Good to hear. And then when it comes to the content and instructional review, where do you typically obtain the current research from for that stage?
That's a great question. So I am constantly reading and talking to my peers in other Minnesota districts about what is the current research that is coming, like say for reading. The one that I'm paying close attention to right now is math, because the science of reading that's happening over here in the literacy world is also happening in the math world. And so we are paying close attention to what's coming out about that. So I would say it's a team effort. All of the coaches, myself, Carrie Duba, and then peers in other districts, we are constantly talking to each other about what the current landscape is for each content area.
Okay. And then regarding the schedule of professional development is for the staff training, is that done? Do you mean in-house or through other organizations?
We do ours in-house
Okay.
for the building meetings. And then in February, we typically will have outside trainers come in to work with our staff.
Okay. And then regarding the READ Act, you had sent us this kind of database showing the timeline and a lot of information.
Congrats to you if you read all that. That's good.
Yeah, I gave it a good try. Anyway. So we had revised our literacy plan in May of this year.
Mhm.
And does that mean, does all of this mean that we're going to have to revise it again prior to next May of 2024?
Well, it's due at the end of June, and I have to submit that every year. And so the state will be changing the components that are required in that literacy plan. So I fully expect that we will have our team relook at it and resubmit a new literacy plan with the new requirements.
Okay. And you're expecting that would have to take place prior to June, or is June still the deadline?
I'm pretty sure that's going to still be the deadline. That's what it's been in the past,
Okay.
along with the data about our readers. So we submit current year data and then the new literacy plan to the MDE at the end of every school year.
Okay. And then I had a question about the letters training. That's part of the READ Act. Actually, my question is maybe more for Val because it's a financial question. So the READ Act allocates money or funding, I should say, for compensation for letters training, or depending on which of the three institutions you choose to fulfill that requirement of the READ Act. And since we had done ours previous to the allocation, does that mean that we missed out on the state funded compensation?
I wish there was compensation. How else can I say that, Val?
So possibly, not all of our staff are letters trained yet.
Right.
So there is opportunity for some of our staff to maybe access that. My understanding is that initially the funding is to pay for the training and materials and not necessarily the time for staff to go. So even if there is some help on the cost of materials and training, the larger portion of the cost is actually paying staff to do the work. And so that would still be on our own expense anyway. So possibly we might still be able to access some of it, but I don't think it would cover the majority of the cost anyway, what they allocated, from what I understand.
What percentage of staff that will be required to have gone through this training are already completed?
I don't have that percentage off the top of my head, mostly because the READ Act changed or actually expands who needs that training. So and I don't want to say the wrong year. So beginning July 1st, 2024, we have to train all intervention teachers. We have to train SPED teachers. We have to train EAs. And then beyond that, it will be EL teachers. So that's expanded the scope of what we were initially offering letters, that the population we were offering letters to. Even MDE last year said, hey, you can participate in this, but we're giving priority to K-3 teachers. And then they open it up to 4-5. This goes way beyond that. There was grant money available, it just closed last week, but it was to districts who had or buildings who had FRP above 40%. So the only building in our district that qualified for that grant money to pay for training was NCEC, and they did apply for funding for early childhood letters training.
Okay, so initially, the staff that went through the training would have only been K-3.
And then we had some 4 and 5. They did open it up. So we have an EL teacher at the middle school who's trained. We have an ADSIS teacher at the middle school who's trained. So they didn't fill all the seats, so they kept expanding. But that's as high as we've gone so far.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Any other questions? No.
Thank you for the complete report. Thank you much. What response is your team getting from parents whose children are not reading at grade level?
Well, we haven't sent the letters yet. So
Last year's response.
Well, the last time we did this, interestingly, because I pulled that all up in preparation for this current batch of letters. We did this in January 2019. The old legislation said, yes, you are required to inform parents if their students are not reading at grade level. This legislation has a few more components that need to be in that letter. But we did that in January of 2019, and the response was, we didn't actually get the huge response we would have thought we would have gotten. Parents did reach out to their classroom teachers, which is exactly what we want. But the letter was on district letterhead, which we will do again. So I think this time we will not just do a letter, Noel. We're exploring how we can get this information to parents in talking points so that it goes out in a couple different ways to make sure that that message is heard.
Jeff?
Yeah, thanks for your report. My question would be, with the COVID period, are we getting back into some kind of more normal ranges? Or is it kind of, just comment on, before COVID, and now after that, as far as, are we getting back into some more normal ranges?
We are seeing increases in our student outcomes. And so when I come in November and get to share all the good news about our MCA results, we did see an uptick in many grade levels. So that gives us some indication that yes, students are returning to pre-pandemic levels.
Couple questions for you, Hope. The first one is you're mentioning the screener. Is that the star reading literacy test?
Yes.
So you mentioned if students have 2 consecutive years of 48% or less, then they would be earmarked to reach out to, correct? What happens if a student misses a test, whether it be in the fall or spring, and they don't have a second consecutive one, but there's obviously other benchmarks because they're in the classroom every day with their teacher?
Yep.
Is there outreach then in that case? I mean, I know there's always intervention, but in terms of how it applies to the READ Act, is there any protocol there?
Yeah, we've already made a special little group of kids who are new to the district and only have a fall screener. We are pulling other metrics on them just to get some confirmation on that. We just don't feel like using only a fall screener is appropriate because many kids experience some summer loss and just need to be back in the classroom and their score rebounds. That's why we're going back for 2 consecutive. So if they are missing a score, we will look for other metrics, either on other assessments we use or in discussion with the teacher.
Okay, and then I was gonna ask you to delve a little bit deeper into React from the perspective that Dr. Hillman has shared several times. The length of 8-point font legislation that has fallen to E12 education. The READ Act is particularly a big piece of that. I know you kind of gave us the top level view and then Jenny had some questions, but how robust of an undertaking is this for the district?
So it is robust, right? Because what it requires, and you guys had an electronic link to this table, and that's really what we're doing for every piece of legislation is taking it out of the larger legislation and then putting it by content area so we can keep track of what's coming due and when, because as you can see, there's a long rollout for some of these pieces and then a very quick runway for others. So it's really just kind of organizing it and making sure we don't miss pieces of it. The good news is within the Big 9 teaching and learning group, for instance, this is all we talk about, or districts are calling to say, hey, what are you doing about this? Because it is a lot to keep track of. And at this point for this first year, we are just going to hit the metrics that are due this year and then start planning for the ones that are coming up.
All right, thank you. Any final comments? Ben?
Think so.
Yeah.
Microphones are good. So if somebody wants to keep track of the instructional review cycle process, how do they do that?
So it's on our website and you can look at it there. Again, we are looking at it every year to make sure that we are covering what we need to. For instance, this year, because of our math results, we decided to move math up a year in the cycle and switch it with social studies, which is now back a year. Talked to the teams and they were both fine with that. But it's really an ongoing assessment of each curricular area to make sure that we are covering the ground we need to with each team.
Superintendent Hillman, Director Mersdorf, comments from either of you?
No, I think Hope has covered the report for this evening and just we appreciate her leadership.
Just want to make sure you're awake over there. Thanks, Hope.
All right, thank you.
All right,
I'll
moving
see
ahead.
you in November.
Yes, look forward to it. Moving ahead to item B, the job position restructuring, Director of Human Resources Molly Wieselman and Director of Finance Val Mersdorf will present a recommendation to restructure the district's payroll position and the district's benefits position and reassign them to the confidential employee group. Welcome, Molly and Val.
Thank you. You didn't load it? Okay. Well, that's fine. Okay, so we are here to talk about the two positions in our district office, what is currently called our benefit specialist position and our payroll specialist position. We recently had a resignation in the HR department for that benefits specialist position. And when I received the reference call for that individual and talking with that HR director in Lakeville, I said, well, if I'm going to be filling this position, what is your pay range? And he told me $70,000 to $85,000 a year. And that was well out of range of what we're paying, just a little over 50,000 for that same position in Northfield here right now. So that led me to do a further market study, surveyed all of our big 9 districts, as well as some to our north that aren't necessarily big 9 districts, but that are close enough that people would travel to those districts like Lakeville, Farmington, some of those that are just 15 to 20 miles from us. And as you saw in the packet that was sent out to you, we are at a little over 50,000, lagging significantly behind the other districts in the market study that we did. And we did a market study for all of our office employee positions about a year to a year and a half ago. And these two positions then were a little out of whack, but they are very out of whack now. So that is when Val and I started talking about, changing these positions to get them in line with what they're paid elsewhere. And we started talking about the negotiations process, which is very time consuming. On the opposite year that we do teachers, we do 16 other employment agreements, and about 10 to 11 of those groups we directly meet with them. You wouldn't know the difference between when we meet with those groups and when we meet with the teachers. We follow the same process. It's very time consuming, keeping up that back and forth working document during a negotiation sessions, updating those contracts once the negotiation sessions are done, getting them to the website, pulling the benefit data that we need for the negotiations process, as well as payroll data as well. So we started talking about how we were going to redo these positions. And that's when we decided that our recommendation to the board is that we would, to be very transparent, eliminate the current 2 positions that are in place, the benefit specialist position and the payroll position as they currently exist. The benefit, the new payroll position, we do have an incumbent on that position and they would stay in their position. The benefit specialist position, these positions would have 2 new titles, new job descriptions. And then we would post our benefit position. And our recommended salary for those positions is $68,000 a year. And we would move them to the confidential employment agreement because then they can work with the negotiations data, which that confidential classification allows them to work with negotiations data, because you can't really outside that classification do that. Do you have anything you want to add, Val?
I think you covered it.
So that is basically our proposal to change these positions. If there's any questions, we'd be glad to answer them.
All right, thanks Molly and Val. Any questions or comments from the board? Ben?
It sounds like, and you know, in the sake of efficiency, that I know this is an item for information right now, or well, or not an item for action on the agenda, but I assume that, you know, being able to post and move forward at these positions sooner rather than later would be helpful if that was an action the board felt like we wanted to take this evening.
Jeff?
Molly?
Oh,
or-
yes, I would. I mean, that would, I'm not planning on posting the position until the board makes a decision on that. And so that position, it has been, her last day was Friday. And so she is gone now and in her new position at Lakeville. So yeah, that we are short a person in our department until we can post and fill that job.
And that was the benefits position, correct?
Yes.
And given that we are heading toward November, I'm guessing this is busy season for a position like that, so being down that person would be problematic.
Yes, our open enrollment actually starts November 6th and goes through November 17th. And we are doing a carrier, health insurance carrier change. So January 1st, we'll be changing our health benefits from Medica to Blue Cross Blue Shield. And that is a major undertaking for that benefits position. And my position to make that change from one carrier to another.
Jeff?
Yeah, I would say obviously with open enrollment coming up, this is a real busy time. And do you see any other information or anything that you'd like to do? I mean, I am kind of for moving forward tonight if we can, if you want to just post that position, if we had a motion to move forward on that. Is there any other additional information you really need other than the details you have and just the ability to post the job?
Yeah, that, I mean, your approval tonight would actually, yes, allow me to post the job tomorrow, but otherwise I would wait until the second meeting in October.
Other questions, comments?
Yeah, so with that, can I put a motion on the agenda to approve that based on the vote tonight?
So a motion to move the job position restructuring to item C tonight for items for action?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second? Ben, Noel, do you have a question?
This is an important issue. I'd like to get Dr. Hillman's input on it, please.
Thank you. Dr. Hillman, anything to add?
Yes, and so I just appreciate the work that Molly and Val have done on the market study. We need to make sure that we are keeping our salary and benefits competitive. Think that if you see the proposal, we're talking about a very reasonable compensation package compared to the other school districts in that list. So even after moving forward with this restructuring, these positions won't be at the top of that list, but they'll no longer be substantially below the bottom of the list. And so I really think that we need to make sure that we are competitive in these positions. And right now, there's a lot of shakeup in the labor market. There's a lot of different things that are happening across the state, not just in education, but in other competitive positions to this. Schools are not our only competitors when it comes to positions like this. So doing the best that we can to stay current is really important. And I appreciate the work of the market study. It does show that in these two particular positions, specifically, that we have really fallen behind.
And one thing I would add is that with that market being the way it is, the job market being the way it is, there are other factors that have come into play, I believe, since the last time we did a market study on our office employee group, is that the Affordable Care Act was passed, and that has added a complete layer of complexity to that benefit position. That federal law is not easy to understand or implement or keep current. Tax laws are always changing, and that comes into play with the payroll position. There's just a lot of factors that have gone into, I think, why those salaries have probably changed the way they have in the last year and a half since we did a market study.
New unemployment as well.
Yes, and the new unemployment that, where our school year employees, were never eligible for unemployment in the past. And now they are, has really created an uptick in, workload for, the benefits position and the payroll position in tracking, all that unemployment. You have to respond to every single, item that you receive for unemployment, and that has taken up a lot of time too, and there's some complexities involved in that as well.
All right, thank you, Molly. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion before we vote to move this to an item for action tonight? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll vote on that later tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna move ahead to item C, the Northfield High School Facility Community Survey. Dr. Hillman will review a proposal from Morris Leatherman to conduct a professional telephone survey to gauge community attitudes about updates to the Northfield High School facility and the associated cost. Dr. Hillman.
Good evening. Thank you very much for considering this proposal this evening. Again, not asking for any board approval tonight. But as you know, one of the 4 focus areas that I have this year as the superintendent, in addition to my job responsibilities, is helping the board find a way to determine what the appropriate pathway forward is for the facilities challenges that we have at Northfield High School. And a year ago in October, we did complete a community survey. It was a randomized stratified sample survey. So this is a scientific survey with a plus or minus range of 4.8%. And so this is as good of data as we can get. And so that data that we got a year ago was very helpful in many, many ways. It gave us some good feedback about the district. It gave us some good feedback about what we were considering for the high school project at that time. And as everyone knows, we did not move forward with bringing anything before the voters this year. The earliest we would consider bringing something before the voters would be November of 2024. But that data is really out of date now. There's been a number of economic changes, just a number of other kinds of things that might influence people's position on such a proposal. And we think it's really important when we're talking about something that will be as expensive as a high school renovation or whatever the board determines is the pathway forward, that getting some additional data is a really good idea. So I spoke with Don Lifto from Morris Leatherman. He talked about, rather than completely redoing the survey, something called a tracking survey. And so what you would see is the survey timeline we'd be looking at. We would begin designing the questionnaire in early December. We'd finally approve the survey questionnaire toward the end of December. The company would begin its phone interviews in January. We would receive that district report in early February, and then the board would get the report in mid-February. So just again, how they conduct this, they will complete 400 telephone calls. And again, this time around, it'll be a 35 multiple choice question. Last time, I believe it was 40 to 43 questions that we did in 2022. There were some open questions last time around. Morris Leatherman does not believe that that's necessary in this particular tracking survey. People often ask, well, nobody ever answers their phone anymore? How will we get 400 callers? And so what we know is that it comes through with the caller ID as Morris Leatherman, as a Minneapolis phone number. Morris Leatherman does leave a message for those people who did not answer. And believe it or not, quite a few of them call back. They will just keep making calls until we have the appropriate demographic sample with 400 completed telephone interviews. And as you may recall, Don Lifto had shared with us that when they call people, if they want to ask them questions about national issues or even state issues, many times people don't want to talk to them. But when they tell them that it's about something that could impact their local community, the survey company says that people are more than willing to talk to them. And they've had we got some really good feedback out of that previous survey. So again, the margin of error is 4.8% on a 400 caller sample. And I've shared this before, you've seen the data before, that Morris Leatherman has an incredibly strong track record in successfully modeling what voters would support in any operating levy or bond referendum. And so if we think about the amount of time that it takes everyone, that it takes the district staff, that it takes the board, that it takes the community to become informed, we want to be able to ask a reasonable question. I don't want to come to you with suggestions or pathways that we don't think have any kind of chance within the community. And conversely, we would like to know what are the things that the community really feel are important as we're considering what the future facility adjustments at Northfield High School would be. The survey would cost us $23,500. That's $5,000 less than the initial survey that we did in 2022. However, we did split the cost of the survey in 2022 with the city of Northfield, and that would not be the case at this time. So I certainly understand when we look at this kind of expense of $23,000 for a survey like this, we might look at it and say, boy, that's a lot of money, and it certainly is. But when I think about what we're going to ask the community about, and when we think about the amount of time that all of us will put in, I think that getting some additional data to really sharpen the questions that we're asking and the pathways that we're considering is a wise move at this time. So I'd be happy to stand for any questions on the proposal. Again, not asking for a vote tonight. I'll bring that to the next board meeting, but I wanted you to be able to think about it and to be able to get any questions out this evening that you might have about the survey.
Thank you, Dr. Hillman. Reminder, this is just an item for information specifically about doing a survey. Any questions from board members? Jenny.
Thank you, Dr. Hillman. I have a couple of questions. I went through the previous, the results of the 2022 survey, and I noticed it mentions the word voters 16 times, but it doesn't give us the actual number of registered voters in the school district. Do you happen to have that number or what that was in 2022 for that survey?
Yes, if you give me just 1 minute, I can easily pull it up off of the Secretary of State's website. So just give me 1 second and I'll pull it up. Almost there.
And a hazard, I guess it's around 14,000.
I think it's a little bit more than that, but you're very close, Corey. I think that I remember it being around 19,000, but I'm almost to the site here. So just give me 1 second. Thanks for your patience. We want to be specific with this. Yeah, the at 7 a.m. On the election day, it was 18,767 registered voters in the Northfield School District. Now remember, we are in 3 counties. We have a very small slice of Goodhue County, some Dakota County. The bulk of our voters are obviously in Rice County, but the number of registered voters on the morning of the election in 2022 in November was 18,767. And I do think it's probably a fair estimate to say you could even see a little bit more in 2024 because it is a presidential election year. 2022 is pretty big. It was the governor and quite a few other House seats were up, Senate and a House of Representatives. So I would anticipate the same number of voters, if not even a little bit more in the next election.
Okay, thank you for confirming that number. And then I just wanted to ask, this particular survey, is there an area anywhere, maybe after the questions are asked, where the respondent can offer their own comments?
There can be, yes. We were in the current proposal, there is not that included for open-ended responses. There can be, and if that's something the board would like me to ask for, the quote from Morris Leatherman, the encoding of open-ended responses will cost us more. Can it be done? Absolutely. We did that actually in the last survey. In the tracking survey, so after you've done an initial survey, I'm fairly certain to attempt to keep the cost down. Those open-ended comments were not recommended at this time by Morris Leatherman for the purposes of updating the data that we secured. However, I know that if I talked to them and said we would like to get some additional comments, they absolutely will do that. It would cost us more than what they have presented right now. I don't know how much more it would cost. And so I certainly can get that information for the next meeting if that's something that's important for the board. I do think what would be good is if board members can think about if you were interested in an open-ended prompt, what is the kind of thing that what's the kind of data you would like from that open-ended prompt? Morris Leatherman is just sensational in really thinking through what's the right question to ask to get the information that you're interested in. Not necessarily the information you want, right? But what is the information that you are interested in hearing to be able to inform your decision? So I can certainly ask, what would the cost of at least one open-ended question be from their perspective?
The reason I ask, I guess, is mainly because I'm kind of torn between, when I take into consideration that this will be only 400 voters out of almost 19,000, possibly more for that November 2024 time period. I just don't have a lot of confidence. If the questions are going to be yes and no, what information am I I just don't think that's the kind of information I'd be looking for that would help us form the questions that we'd be bringing to the ballot. 400 out of 19,000 just isn't a strong enough number for me. And I realize that a lot more would make it stronger, but then the cost would also be increased by quite a bit. And that it would not be something that I would want to look forward to either. So that's kind of why I'm torn, but I mentioned the comment portion of it because I really think that we could use the feedback, I think, and you mentioned that before about the last time around that we did receive a lot of great feedback. And we also received, I think, I heard a lot of good feedback at the board meeting too during the previous high school when you had visited this the previous time. And I think that is more important because it brings to the table ideas that possibly us board members might not have even considered. And so that's kind of the reason I bring it up.
Yeah, and Jenny, I can get you some additional information. So it's interesting, the way that Morris Leatherman does the survey, the randomized stratified sample, I can get you the data of the survey results that they got from numerous other school districts and how that played into the data that actually came in on election day. So the actual results and the way that they do the demographic sample, because I totally understand what you're saying, 400 out of 18,000, how could that be predictive? But what's really interesting is that the way that they construct the demographic sample, they have an incredible track record of properly predicting what they think voters would support. That may or may not help you, but I think it's good information. I should have included in the packet tonight. I did not. I can bring it from last year's packet. There's the only times where they've really had any issues with their survey versus the voter results were when there was some kind of unusual issue that happened between the time that the survey was conducted and the time of election day. Now, one of my worries is that we would conduct the survey, 8 months, 9 months, before election day. We get those results in late February. Now there's just some difficulty there because we really can't wait all that much longer with some of the new timelines to be able to decide on a pathway forward. Yet this is about we could probably wait another month, but then every month that we wait, that gives us less of a time to have a conversation in the community about the needs. So there's trade-offs to all of it, but I'd be happy to get you the data that supports that this demographic randomized sample survey, it's more than just a voter poll. Again, plus or minus the margin of error being 4.8%. I'd like it to be 1%, but that's just it's not gonna work out that way. So the other part I just want to share, I'm gonna be giving more of a full introduction to the plan for the pathway to gather feedback about the potential high school project. And that's going to include some tours of our facility and asking people for their feedback after those tours. So this wouldn't be the only way that we would get you some very organized and deliberate feedback, Jenny. So just to share those two items as well.
Okay, thank you. And I do think that this is the survey is a very responsible action that we can take on behalf of our voters, and I really support it. But I am just kind of torn with comparing that number. Is there, Dr. Hellman, is there any alternative that you've thought of previously or that has ever been on the table, an alternative to doing this survey?
So could you tell me a little bit more about what you're thinking? Are you thinking about other kinds of surveys or other strategies?
Well, either, yes. some kind of public forum or, something else that perhaps wouldn't cost as much as this survey?
Yeah, that's a great question. And any way that you gather feedback on something of this nature, there's some imperfection, right? So if we do an opt-in survey, so for example, let's say that we used Google Forms and we constructed our own survey. We're pretty good at conducting or constructing survey questions. I feel that our team could write some really good survey questions, but anytime that you have an opt-in survey, you can struggle with, are you actually getting a representative sample of the voters? And so typically what we see with those, there's people who are diligent about providing feedback, people who just have us go to their spam, things like that, both willingly and unwillingly, I might add. You can do focus groups. We've done some focus groups in the past. For example, last winter, a year ago, we did a high school facilities task force. And in advance of that, we did a number of listening sessions with various stakeholder groups. Again, you're trying to make those stakeholder groups as representative of our demographics as possible, but it's not perfect. We have all of that data. The needs of the building, if you really think about it, overall, the needs of the building are very similar right now as they were a year ago. So that data and that report from the task force is still viable and still valid. When you look at anything other than, in my opinion, when you look at anything other than a true stratified random sample survey, the variability of information for the board widens. So this plus or minus 4.8% is probably about as good as you can get to try to get a sampling of what do you think the voters are willing to consider. And also, you learn a lot in these kinds of surveys. Now, this you can learn from both methods, but with the randomized stratified sample, I think you have better confidence that it is true or not. And so you can hear from people if you do some of the open-ended responses, like you said, it could provide an opportunity for you to have some ideas about maybe there's some misconceptions about a potential project. Maybe it points to what kind of education do we need to do of the community. So there are other methods for sure. I don't have the number for you, but what I can tell you to be true is their variability, their margin of error is far worse than plus or minus 4.8%.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. We're going to go over the no.
The information we had speaks to the professional telephone survey to gauge the community attitudes about the high school. Will there be any possibility that could include the hockey arena?
So no, that's a great question. And I don't anticipate putting any questions in our survey about the hockey arena. Remember, the hockey arena is a city function. The city owns it. We are certainly a partner. We have committed to whatever strategy is used to address that long-standing dilemma of another city facility problem, community facility problem, through our lease levy, through leasing ice time. However, we are not the organization that's going to build that. And so I think that my recommendation will, of course, the wisdom of the board, we could put something in if the board would like us to. I would recommend that we leave that out of this to keep the main thing, and focus on the high school facility.
Thank you.
Jeff.
Yeah, do you have a number of, out of the 400, of how many of those would be actual property taxpayers in the district?
That's a great question, Jeff, and I have to think about the report. So I do think that I will get that information for you at the next meeting, specifically if they break that down by who specifically is a property owner who pays property taxes. Now, remember, the fact is that we're looking at voters, right? That's who we are trying to gauge their perspective, because those are the folks who make the decision. There are some people who would argue that whether or not you pay property taxes officially, let's say that I rent a business downtown, for example, even though I might be a voter, I might not actually pay property taxes on my downtown business, but I do have a real opinion on it, because I know that if the owner of the building that I lease or rent has their property taxes increased, that might increase my rent. So you're right, Jeff, that we have a group of folks who pay property taxes, others who maybe, if you don't own property, don't directly pay property tax. But there's also a school of thought that regardless of what I do, I'm impacted by property taxes, either through some goods and services that I purchase or the actual direct increase in my tax bill. So I can ask Morris Leatherman. I'm not remembering off the top of my head, Jeff, as to whether or not they break that down by how many people in the sample own a property that is taxed for a project like this.
A follow-up question. Are you saying that we would get this data or information back 8 months before the actual election?
Well, we would get the data back in mid-February, so it's probably closer to, I would say, 8.5, 9 months before the election.
Yeah, well, a lot of things can change between there and November, but yeah, I hear you. Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Yeah, Corey, if I could just follow up on that one more time too. I think that there's really a dilemma there, right? Because there is a lot of that information that we would get from the survey that would be very helpful in the board determining what pathway, if any, you were to choose to move forward. But we have to be transparent that 9 months is a long time from the time that we would get that data until the election. I think there's also a risk of waiting too long as well. And so we theoretically could push a survey and a decision out a couple of months later. My concern is that there's some new things that we have to respond to in any bond project. So for example, one of the nuggets in the 340-page legislation is that the review and comment authorization from MDE, we need to submit that I believe another 5 weeks earlier than we have had to do the last time. So that means that we have to have all the actual ballot question and those kinds of things. We typically had to approve that no later than the second meeting in August, depending on the year and the date. So now you're backing that up, that has to be finalized in July. So now then we start thinking about all those deliberations. And also, if you consider that when we come back to school, a typical bond or operating levy informational campaign typically really kicked off the biggest right after school starts. But if you think about some of the voting timelines that have changed in the last few years, early voting now starts really in September. And so just a few weeks after school starts, we could have people who are completing ballots at the polls. So to make sure that people have the information they need to make an informed decision, we really want to use the spring, and this is part of the timeline I'll be bringing at the next meeting, to be able to inform voters, probably just have a little bit of a less part of the informational campaign in the summer, and then again, ramping it back up once the school year starts. What I'm just concerned about is, number one, the ability to get the timeline so that we can get all of the data into MDE, so we can get the appropriate decisions from them about our project. We are confident that it will come back with a positive review and comment, but you just have to have it done that much earlier. In addition, just making sure that we're able to educate voters who might want to vote early. So those are just some wrinkles. Again, you're weighing and measuring. We want to have enough information for you to be able to make the best decision with what we have at the time. And you have to balance that against the time frame that we have between the time we get the data and the time the election is.
All right. Dr. Hillman, I am certainly in favor of moving ahead with the survey. You did a great job explaining why. It is one tool that we can use to help determine a decision for the much needed high school project, whatever that project may be. And just as you said, the timeline makes sense because as a board, we are charged with making a decision. And I think if we can have that settled in by mid-spring, and have this be a tool that helps us have a focused discussion that come to a consensus, that would be to our benefit. And I did look up September 22nd is early voting. So certainly we do not have the same amount of time as we would have had in prior years, going back a couple election cycles. So any last comments? All right. Thank you, Dr. Hillman. We'll now move to item D, Policy Committee recommendations. Superintendent Hillman will present the Policy Committee's recommended updates to policies 206, 208, 208, and 209.
Yes, we have 3 policies that we are now back to the regularly scheduled review of policy. So our goal is to review every policy at least once every 5 years. And we do it in a very methodical fashion, thanks to Anita Ozzie for making sure that we keep on track with that. So we're back, as you know, into the 100s and the 200 components here. And so the 3 that we're looking at tonight are 206, 208, and 209. And so when we take a look at 206, this is really about the public comment portion of the school board. And so we have kept this up over the years to make sure that we do two items, that we give the public a regular opportunity to provide feedback at board meetings in a structured format. I think it's always important to remember that a board meeting is a meeting of the board held in public. And so there's actually no state requirement to offer the public comment period. The changes that we have, the modest changes that we have in here are actually things that have really been part of our procedures for some time. And so the key part is, as board members are well aware, Corey or Claudia or Julie before her read what the criteria are at the beginning of each meeting. And so we've been using this same process for a long time. We've now modified some of it, not modified, but we are looking to include that in the policy as opposed to procedure. So that's really about this is really in 6B. We're talking about that the board shall normally provide up to 30 minutes of time. That's something that we've done for several years now. And then for even longer than that, we have a 3-minute limit for people to address the board. And again, that is intended to make sure that as many people are able to speak within that 30-minute time frame as possible. So again, fairly limited changes. Other than that, this is really about updating this particular policy to make sure that it matches what Corey and what Claudia read when people do have public comment. Again, no change to the process. It would just include that statement in the actual policy itself. I'm going to go through all three of them, and then we can talk about each one individually as needed. Policy 208 is about the development and implementation of policies. And again, what you'll look at here is this is something that the board had actually already authorized to do for us to do. And I'm now looking at 4E, 4D and E, I should say. And so the board actually had already authorized the policy committee to do this. This is how we have been functioning. We noticed that we really wanted to make it explicit in the policy. So that section E says that the policy is modified with a minor change that does not affect the substance of the policy. The board's policy committee can make these changes without approval of the board, and the policy would include a notation as reviewed and included in the date. An example of that is that you as a board did adopt a style guide to say, in certain circumstances, how do we refer to the school district? What's the standard sequence of how we put a policy together? Those are the kinds of inconsequential changes that we're talking about. They're important for the consistency of policies so that when people are looking at them, they can have a predictable flow and method that we're calling the district. What we're calling it in one policy is the same as in another. So that is really what we're talking about in that change. And again, we also did add, just to make sure that even though it was already part of practice, that the district retains policies in accordance with the school district general records retention schedule. Again, that's we follow the state lead on that. So policy 208, again, just updating it to make sure that it's very clear things that the board had already authorized, that we are able to do so. And so one other point in letter D there, that talks about if the policy is modified because of a legal change, which the board has no control, that policy can be approved at one meeting at the discretion of the board in the consent agenda. And as you know, we've done that with a number of policies where the board doesn't, we don't have a choice. We have to follow state law. And so updating policies to reference state law when we're doing those kinds of things, those can be done in one meeting in the consent agenda. So just pointing that out. And then the final policy that's for first reading tonight is the Code of Ethics. And the Code of Ethics is something we actually have reviewed fairly recently, but again, it comes back up on the cycle, and we want to make sure that we keep the cycle going. So just a couple of minor changes there. We're doing some things like just changing the language, for example, and talking about making sure that when people do have complaints, which we, of course, complaints are part of our governance process, that we use the policy outlined in policy 103 about how to refer the public to complaints. That's one example. There's some other pieces about being prepared for meetings, etc. Informing board members, informing themselves about proper duties and functions through MSBA state required training and other recommended state organizations. Those kinds of modest changes. That's the typical piece that we'll see when we're just reviewing a policy. So those are the three policies that are up for first reading tonight. Again, no action. These would be on the next board agenda for your approval then. I'd be happy to stand for any questions at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Hillman. Do any board members have questions or comments?
And Corey, I think it's good to, Ben Miller and Noel Stratmon and Claudia are the policy committee, just to bring that back to people's minds. So Ben and Noel can also weigh in on the committee's deliberations.
Yeah, I would just echo what Matt said in terms of, I think you did a good job describing what the changes were. The policies as reviewed them several weeks ago.
No comments? All right, we'll move ahead. Item number 7, we'll now move on to the approval of the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were some personnel items in the table file added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Jeff, second by Ben. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. And now we're heading into items for individual action. We do have 3 items tonight, since we did move one from items for information. First up is a resolution of the school board supporting the Form A application to Minnesota State High School League Foundation. Director of Student Activities, John Mahal, requests approval of the attached resolution supporting the district's application to the Minnesota State High School League Foundation for a Form A grant to offset student activity fees. Dr. Hillman, are you presenting on this or providing comment?
I can. So you've got 2 items right back to back. These are the State High School League Foundation applications. The State High School League does require a resolution be taken by the board to support the application itself, or the submission of the application, I could say. Form A is about receiving some reimbursement, if you will, some funding is the better term, from the State High School League Foundation to help offset student activity fees. So the intent here is for students who need scholarships to be able to participate, that the State High School League Foundation gives districts a small amount of money, and I'd have to ask Val if she knows how much we've received in the past. You're simply approving the submission of the application, and then I'll just cover Form B right now, if that's okay. Corey, is that all right, just to cover what Form B
Yes.
is as well? Yep, so Form B, again, is another part of the foundation, really specifically for requests for things like health and safety, leadership initiatives, and transportation that reduces barriers to participation. So what I know some districts are doing, we're fortunate, we have a number of AEDs in the district, but there are some districts that use this grant application or this foundation application to be able to purchase additional AEDs for location at specific places and that their athletics are played. It also could be things for, potentially even our activity bus, a little bit of offset of our activity bus to help reduce transportation barriers for students. Things like our rally program at the high school are also things that could be applied for. So what we're asking you to do is to just approve the submission. John Mahal will take care of the actual application itself. And for Form B, put what he thinks is the most pressing need for the activities department in those 3 areas that can be funded.
I apologize for not taking a motion before asking Dr. Hillman to speak on this, but I think I'll survive. This is a resolution, so we will have a roll call vote. Before we do that, though, we have a motion. Jeff, in a second. Ben, okay, any comments from board members on this piece? For item A? No, okay. Anita, can you take roll call, please?
Butler,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Stratmon.
Okay, passes 5-0. We're looking at item B, which Dr. Hillman did just explain. So we have Director of Student Activities, John Mahal, requests approval of the attached resolution supporting the district's application to the Minnesota State High School League Foundation for a Form B grant to assist with costs in 3 specific areas, including health and safety, leadership initiatives, and transportation, and reduces barriers to participation. Do we have a motion? Ben, and second, Jeff. And again, this is a roll call vote.
Butler,
Aye.
Gonzalez, Miller,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Stratmon.
Motion passes 5-0. And then finally, we did move item C, job position restructuring. This was moved from items for discussion and reports from our earlier discussion. We have a motion on this item. Jenny, in a second. Ben, any discussion on this? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Nay, it's hard doing this. I almost forgot to vote. Passes 5-0. All right. Moving ahead to number 9, items for information. We have enrollment report. Dr. Hillman will review the October 2023 enrollment report.
Yes, I will. So I'm going to bring it up on the screen here. So you'll see that our initial enrollment report, and really what we're focused on is the October 2nd data. What we know is that the data in the first few weeks of school can really fluctuate as things get settled out. And the October 1st, it's essentially the October 1st date. This year, the first workday was the 2nd, really is instrumental in the funding that we receive for this upcoming school year. So this is the actual data. And what we're showing here is right now.
To enlarge it so we can see.
Yes, I am. You bet. How about that? Is that better?
It's good for me, board members.
Okay. And you have it in your packet as well.
Correct.
So what you'll see here is this number 3782 is the one that we really look at strongly to begin with. This is the full-time only, excluding the early childhood students and the part-time independent study ALC. So the key part is this next item right here, which is the 3774. That is what Director of Finance Murdesdorf has projected for this year. So you'll see that we are 8 over projection at this point, which we feel is a pretty good place to be. And so again, this is the year that we had intended to see stabilized enrollment, and then next year seeing the decline that we've experienced over the last few continue. So you're seeing here again, just a little bit above projection, which we think is a good place to be. So I would be happy to take any questions that people have about the enrollment report.
Board members, any questions or comments? I think we're good there. All right, moving ahead. B, National School Lunch Week. National School Lunch Week will be celebrated October 9 through 13, so this week. The National School Lunch Program serves nearly 30 million children every school day. President John F. Kennedy created National School Lunch Week in 1962 to promote the importance of a healthy school lunch in a child's life and the impact it has inside and outside the classroom. We appreciate and thank all child nutrition staff in our district. Dr. Hillman, I assume you echo those comments. Any further comment?
Yeah, I do. We just got a note. Stephanie Strummy shared with me a note that we got from a parent today, just really lauding our child nutrition workers and the quality of the food that their student is getting this year. And so we just really appreciate, I've had a chance to serve lunch in 3 cafeterias so far this year. And I'll tell you, these people work incredibly hard. You think about serving that number of children in a short amount of time. And what I will tell you is it takes there's a lot of patience that needs to happen to serve kindergartners in the first month of school. And our staff just do it so well. The other thing that you should be really impressed with is many of these staff members know every kid by name. And in fact, when in the elementary schools, the workers know the preference for the children coming through. Do they want a hot lunch or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? It's just really amazing to see the interaction, and it takes all of us to prepare every student for lifelong success. So we appreciate child nutrition staff's efforts on that regard.
Thank you. And then next week is National School Bus Safety Week, October 16th through the 20th. School buses are the safest way for children to get to school. Their design is meant to be safer than any passenger vehicle in avoiding crashes and preventing injuries. Teaching children to follow safety rules on the bus is important, as is informing drivers about the laws regarding school buses. We appreciate and thank Benjamin Bus and their drivers for their continued support in partnership with Northfield Public Schools. Dr. Hillman?
I would just echo what the item there says. We're just so grateful to have we're grateful to have a wonderful company to work with in Benjamin Bus and the incredible training that they do for their drivers. And we just encourage people to be patient around buses and make sure that we're taking our time. So we, of course, are happy to observe National School Bus Safety Week.
All right, thank you. That concludes our business tonight. Last item we have our future meetings. Our next meeting is Monday, October 23rd, 6 p.m. here in the boardroom. It's a regular board meeting. Following that, we have one November 13th at 6 p.m. in the boardroom where we are now. And then finally, Monday, November 27th, 2023, 6 p.m. We have a regular board meeting here in the district office boardroom. That is all of our business tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn? Jeff.
Give it to Noel.
All right, no, I looked left first, sorry.
Second.
Second, Jeff, all right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.